a lot of people don't enjoy posing because they don't feel like they look either sexy enough, or they don't feel like they could be that person on stage. And I try and always like allow people to say, like, regardless of how it's supposed to look, like, you want to enjoy what you're doing regardless. Like, you have to enjoy it to some extent, because otherwise you're not going to then showcase that off to the judges. And that's part of the bodybuilding aspect, is the performance side. Like, you want to, rally up the crowd and make you look good and all that type of thing. So it is part of it. And it can be very difficult when you then start to, climb the ladder. Like you said, like before, you kind of then were like, okay, I have more pressure on myself. Now I'm going into the pro league. I need to do X, Y, Z. So it sometimes does take away the enjoyment of it. And I'm the same. I've been there. Like, it was even me this year where I've, started to feel like, I've built that status up for, being good at posing. I now need to present my posing at its best. And what happens if it's not? Like, I'm very nervous if that happens. Like, so you put that external pressure on yourself. And what I've really realized is you just have to make sure that you just try and take that away and bring forth the actual enjoyment of the process, versus all just being, it has to be like perfection in a way, taking away the perfection side of things and making sure that it's about the enjoyment, with obviously also showing off the assets that you need to.
I love that. And I think like that's a really important lesson. And also just like in either phase, whether you are building or you're cutting down, is like, are you going to let, slight imperfections take away from, the global outcome and like the progress that you've made? And I think like, sure, we can get really granular and be like, okay, well, here's the perfect way to do it. And it's like, yeah, but if it's not repeatable, like what's the probability that you're going to get on stage and do it perfectly? And that was another aspect that like with the practicing, like for the longest time, I did it in front of the mirror and I would get like really frustrated because I'm like, okay, I'm not seeing what I'm trying, to, really encompass, that it's not being reflected in how I'm presenting my physique. And it wasn't until I started looking at it like, no, like this is hygiene. Like this is what this is literally me getting in reps so that I can practice feeling the way I want to feel on stage, which even if I wake up and I'm hungry and I'm at the end of prep and, maybe I got in a fight with my boyfriend, maybe I got cut off, in traffic, but I'm like, okay, I'm in a shit mood. I'm going to train, but I'm going to do 20 minutes of posing here before my session, because it's a commitment I made to myself. And part of that commitment is maybe not even executing the technical 100% correctly, but it's giving myself the responsibility to practice encompassing the mindset that I want to have on stage, which I feel like, technique aside, I mean, maybe this isn't transferable to all listeners, but it's like, technique aside, being able to practice that mindset and decide that preemptively, I feel like that really set me up for success, as opposed to just thinking you got to do it right, and if it's not perfect, then it's wrong.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, and I think practice over perfection definitely comes to an extent, because again, like it comes back to your body being that, what's the word that we used, that I used, my brain's just gone blank there. Your body's a habit. It's mind muscle, like it's muscle memory, like that's exactly what you want to try and enforce when you're doing your posing is, okay, I'm going over the same movement. And it's also about what you practice. I always say to a lot of people, like, don't just practice your routine over and over again, like practice specifics. And it's also very much about environment of stage, because I think what happens most of the time when people get to stage, nerves kick in. Obviously, the environment's very, very different to how you would practice to when you're practicing in the gym or wherever you practice, to then when you go to stage. So for example, I try and get my clients out of their comfort zone a little bit more when they're at like getting closer to show, to kind of get them used to what show day is actually going to be like, because show day is not going to be you alone in your practice room surrounded by a ton of mirrors. It's going to be loud, it's going to be very distracting, and it's going to be like a bit of a rush in a way. So I try and, again, you can't mimic an actual show day. Like you'll never be able to do the exact same, but trying to be confident enough where if you have the gym to be able to allow you to pose on the gym floor, even if you're just in trainers, that's more than enough, because you're then getting yourself out there in the public eye and being, more confident enough to do it in front of people. That's something I try and get girls to do. Again, if you're more confident enough to do it in a bikini and heels and you're happy to do it on the gym floor, if the gym even allows that, then go ahead and do it. But trying to put yourself in a position that is similar to what the stage would be like. So then you don't kind of freeze and you're like, this feels different. Because it's also about familiarity. That's a word I can't say. Familiarity. Do you know what I mean? Like you practice in one way. I've been there before where you practice in the room, in your room, the comfort of where you are, and then you get to stage and it feels completely different and you're like, oh my god, everything feels off. Like I've been there so many times where you're like, that felt different, that felt really off, that felt awful, and you don't know why. And it's because you're conditioned to practicing posing in one certain way. So I always try and say, again, this is all in a perfect world if you can, because don't get me wrong, bodybuilding, yes, we do this as a hobby, but we also have other like our own lives, work that we are committed to, and other things that we have to do. So we can't just focus on, gym hopping and being in different environments and doing, different things. But I try, and if you can, do your posing in different environments. So, one day do it in a posing room where it's a bit better for you. You can see yourself, all that type of thing. Then do it maybe on the gym floor. Then maybe do it in your kitchen where it's maybe a different flooring, or in your living room where it's a different flooring. Because again, flooring does come down to how you sometimes pose and all that type of thing. Like you could go so far into it. And then another aspect is when you get to comparisons. So I see a lot of girls kind of freak out when they have to pose next to competitors, because again, we're used to practicing by ourselves. Like we're not used to practicing next to people. So I always try and say, like, make sure that you are aware, one, of stamina, because you don't know how long you're going to be in the poses for, but then also get used to posing next to something, because you might have all the room in the world obviously next to you, you've got nothing next to you, but then when you've got people around you, you can't open up and pose as high as wide as you usually do. You might have to kind of be a bit more conservative, which is hard. So you have to be comfortable with posing next to people as well. Which again isn't always an option that's available. Posing next to people, you might not have anyone that is posing or anything like that. But if you can get a group of girls together, practice posing next to each other, practice doing your individuals in front of each other, just so you can get used to that actual feeling of what it's actually going to be like on stage, mimicking what's going to be like.